In the final years of World War II, the world watched Nazi Germany collapse under the weight of its own ambition. But what few realize is that many of Hitler's own generals knew the war was lost years before the fighting ended. The truth became clear to them long before Berlin burned. At the start, victory seemed unstoppable. In 1939 and 1940, German forces swept through Poland, Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, and France with terrifying speed. The Blitzkrieg appeared invincible. Generals like Guderian, Manstein, and Rommel believed they were witnessing a new kind of warfare, fast, modern, and unbeatable. But even then, beneath the triumph, cracks were forming. Some officers whispered that Hitler's strategies were reckless, his ambitions unrealistic. They saw how he dismissed his generals, ignored logistics, and replaced planning with ideology. The first seeds of disaster had already been planted. By late 1941, the illusion of invincibility began to crumble. When German forces invaded the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa, they expected victory in a few months. Instead, they found a vast land, endless resistance, and an enemy that refused to collapse. As winter descended, tanks froze, soldiers starved, and supply lines stretched hundreds of miles beyond their limits. Generals on the Eastern Front began to realize the truth. Germany had bitten off more than it could possibly chew. By December 1941, with the failure to capture Moscow and the entry of the United States into the war, the outcome became clear to those who could think beyond propaganda. Privately, officers like Guderian admitted the war could no longer be won. But Hitler refused to listen. He surrounded himself with loyalists, not strategists. Anyone who dared to suggest retreat or negotiation was dismissed or executed. The generals who remained learned to stay silent or to flatter his delusions. In early 1943, after the catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad, there could be no more illusions. An entire German army, more than 250,000 men, had been annihilated. For many officers, this was the turning point. They knew the tide of war had turned permanently against Germany. Yet still, Hitler demanded victory or death, refusing any tactical withdrawal. General Erich von Manstein, one of Germany's most brilliant field commanders, wrote after the war that Stalingrad was the moment he knew defeat was inevitable. But he, like others, continued to fight, partly out of duty, partly out of fear, and partly because they knew disobedience meant death. By 1944, Hitler's grip on reality had nearly vanished. He believed Germany could still win with new miracle weapons, the V-2 rockets, the jet fighters, the secret projects that never came soon enough. But his generals had no such faith. They saw the overwhelming industrial power of the Allies, the endless manpower of the Soviet Union, and the skies filled with bombers. Germany was being destroyed faster than it could rebuild. In July 1944, a desperate group of German officers, including Klaus Stauffenberg, tried to end it. They planted a bomb in Hitler's headquarters, hoping to kill him and negotiate peace before total destruction. The attempt failed. Hundreds were executed. The message was clear. Even in defeat, dissent was treason. By the end of that year, the generals no longer fought for victory. They fought to delay the inevitable, to protect their men, or simply to survive long enough to surrender to the Western Allies instead of the Soviets. Many began secretly destroying records, hiding evidence, and preparing for what they knew was coming. When the final battles reached Germany in 1945, most of Hitler's officers already knew the truth. They had known it for years. Berlin's defenses were a desperate illusion. The armies of the Reich were shattered shadows of their former strength. Hitler still ranted about final victory, but no one believed it anymore. General Heinz Guderian once said that by early 1943, any professional soldier could see the end. From that point on, the only question was how long Hitler would drag his country down with him. When the war finally ended in May 1945, millions were dead. Cities lay in ruins, and the generals who had once believed in conquest now faced trials and shame. Many claimed they had been powerless, victims of a dictator they could not stop. But history remembers differently. They saw the truth and chose to keep fighting. The moment of realization did not come in Berlin or in the Führerbunker. It came years earlier, in the snow outside Moscow, in the rubble of Stalingrad, in the silence after the July plot failed. That was when Hitler's generals knew the Third Reich was doomed. And yet they kept obeying orders, sending men to die for a cause they no longer believed in. Perhaps that is the final tragedy of Nazi Germany. Not just its crimes, but the silence of those who knew the truth and did nothing.